Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. So I got asked to do a short brief video on how I use the dominoes in my shop. There are so many uses for the domino that I don't use just because I'm not fully integrated in their whole system, that there's a lot of features that I just simply don't use. But I will go ahead and show you what I do and what I use. I have both dominoes, the 500 and the XL, and you can see there is a significant size difference. But there's also a significant size difference in the dominoes that they shoot as well. So now the big domino with some adapters will shoot everything that this one will shoot. But the size and the heft of this one, for me, if I could only have one, I would have the 500. To date, I think I've only used the big one, I think on about 3, maybe 4 projects is all I've used it on. So it's nice to have on hand when I want it, but it does not get used that often. The 500 is kind of the workhorse in my shop, and it really is probably the biggest game changer in the woodworking industry in at least the last 50 years. Because it makes a traditional, mortise and tenon joint, where it might take me up to an hour to make that joint, I can do it in just a few minutes with this. So, especially if you're in a production shop and that time is money, you're really moving. The price tags on these, I'm sure that you guys have all seen them. They are not cheap. They darn sure don't give them away. There's lots of accessories that come with it, like this Domi plate. And if you're doing a lot of plywood work and want the domino, this is just a great jig to have on it. To date, I've never used it. I have one, but I've never used it. My primary domino that I shoot is the 8x40s, and in a bigger joint, I might put 2 of them in. Maybe I'll just put 1, maybe I'll put 2. If it's a big enough joint, I'll just go ahead and put 2 of them in, and it's all good. There's numerous different bits that you can put in here to shoot different size dominoes, and that goes for both machines. And the bits aren't cheap either. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of move the camera around here in close. I'm going to show you how I mark for a typical leg and rail situation, and how I adjust the depth to get that little setback that I like to have, about 1/8. And we'll go ahead and shoot up a joint and let you see. Okay, so if all my material were the same thickness, I would just hold them up and put a mark on it and put a mark on it, and I would be moving. But because I want to show you how I get my setback or my reveal, I tend to use a little square. So I can just get my mark there. And it's important that you reference off of the same side. So if this is the top of my rail, then that's where I want my reference from. I always mill scrap parts in the same thickness as the pieces that I'm working with, so that I can make test cuts, just to make sure everything is going to work out just right. We'll move over to the bench now, and we'll cut a rail. And then I'll show you how I make my adjustment, and then we'll go ahead and cut the leg. Okay, I know that this is probably difficult to see. It's difficult to film on camera. But here is my line. And the domino has a center line. So all I'm going to do is line up those lines, and I'm going to shoot. Now, it's important that you know the depth of the domino that you're using. In my case, I'm using 8x40s. So I'm set at 20 millimeter depth. 20 millimeters on each side gives me the total of my 40 millimeter depth. There's also a setting on the top and I have it set on the tight setting, but there's also a medium setting and a really loose setting. So if you were doing an involved glue up and you needed a little wiggle room to help you get everything aligned before you clamped it all up, you could switch it over to one of the looser settings. Typically I run it in the tight setting. Sometimes on leg and styles I'll go ahead and make, say, all of my rails on the tight setting, and I'll put all my legs on the medium setting, just so that I have a little flexibility and movement when I go to the glue up. But for now we're just going to cut this. It's just a matter of lining up the center and going. And just like that, it's done. So for the sake of expediency here, we're going to say that this is my scrap that I'd milled to the same width as my legs. All I did was literally loosen the height adjustment. I raised it up about 1/8 of an inch, and I cut a test. And then I tested that with my good material, and we're about 1/8, maybe a smidge heavy, but it's pretty close. So then I would just readjust everything and go cut my real piece. So there you go, guys. That really is it. It doesn't matter whether you're using, the 500 or the XL, the little ones or the big ones. It really is that simple and that fast. A floating mortise and tenon joint is, there's lots of reviews and tests out there and whatnot. I promise it's plenty strong enough for any table. This allows me to turn a standard table out in the joinery side of it in minutes versus hours in a traditional method, and that time is money. So sometimes it's a real benefit. Sometimes it's also fun to go back and just do traditional mortise and tenons as well. So I hope you guys got something out of that. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me a note. It is an absolute game changer tool. Is it worth the money? Only you can answer that. So that depends on your workshop, your workflow. There's so many variables. It just depends on you. So that's going to wrap it up for this one. Until next time, guys, take care.